Vikings Valhalla has finally concluded with the release of Season 3 to Netflix earlier this month, and in this series many real historical figures such as Leif Erikson, King Canute and Harald Hardrada amongst many others were portrayed. But the deaths of these historical figures in the series is not always true to the facts, and in the majority of cases the final fates of the primary characters are left open-ended or ambiguous. Therefore, in this video we will be delving deep into the real-life deaths of several figures depicted within Vikings Valhalla, including Emma of Normandy, King Canute, Swain Forkbeard, Leif Erikson, Freydis eriksdotter, and Harald Hardrada. By analyzing contemporary sources which comment on the lives of these historical figures, we will attempt to deduce what were the probable causes of death for these characters. But before we begin, don't forget, if you want to learn more about the deaths of some of the greatest figures from history, then subscribe to my channel Historical Exit. The first historical figure from Vikings Valhalla whose death we will be discussing is Emma of Normandy, the conniving and astute Queen of England and the wife of King Canute. According to medieval and contemporary sources, her date of death is stated as being the 6th of March 1052, and there does not seem to be any large degree of contention around this death date amongst the historical sources. Therefore, it can be assumed with a high degree of certainty that Emma of Normandy did indeed pass away on March 6, 1052. How exactly though did this powerful monarch meet her end, and what hints can the historical documents provide us in this matter? The answer is unfortunately very little. As is the case with the vast majority of historical figures, the exact specifics regarding her cause of death are very limited and inexplicit. However, the discourse which is most widely accepted by both contemporary sources and modern historians is that Queen Emma passed away due to natural causes. The Encomium Emmae Reginae is a historical document commissioned by Queen Emma herself in the 1040s, and it provides a detailed overview of her many accomplishments and her overall legacy. Upon examining this historical text, there is no mention of any adverse circumstances or hints of foul play regarding Emma of Normandy's death, which further strengthens the natural cause of death hypothesis favored by the majority of historians. In fact, the death of Emma is mentioned in several historical documents including the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, John of Worcester's Chronicles, and the Gesta Regum Angelorum. All of these sources confirm that Emma of Normandy passed away in 1052, and no mention of any controversy regarding her death is noted in any of these contemporary sources. Therefore, without having any evidence to state otherwise, it is not improbable to accept that Emma of Normandy passed away from natural causes at the age of 68, which was a fairly respectable age of death during the medieval era, making the legacy of Emma of Normandy truly extraordinary from beginning to her peaceful end. One cannot discuss Queen Emma of Normandy and her legacy without mentioning King Canute the Great in the same sentence, and unfortunately, just like his wife, there are no exact specifics recorded within history which provide any meaningful details in regards to the death of King Canute. This is one of the few instances where the depiction of a character's death is pretty close to the historical facts in Vikings Valhalla, and although King Canute was only 45 at the time of his death, it is highly probable that just like his wife Queen Emma, King Canute also passed away from natural causes due to an unidentified illness. The death of King Canute is mentioned in 5 contemporary texts, and none of these sources provide any sort of discourse which would hint towards any sort of foul play resulting in Canute's passing. John Worcester's Chronicle states the following in relation to King Canute's death. In the year of our Lord 1035, King Canute, the most powerful ruler of the English and the Danes, died on the eve of St. Martin at Shaftesbury and was buried at Winchester. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle also provides a very similar sentiment for the year 1035 being the year which Canute passed, stating that in this year King Canute passed away at Shaftesbury on the 2nd Ides of November and he is buried at Winchester. Therefore, we have 5 contemporary and reliable historical sources all agreeing on the time and place of death for King Canute, with not a single source pointing towards anything other than a natural cause of death for the monarch. And without any new evidence to provide an alternative discourse, it is highly plausible to conclude that King Canute passed away from natural causes. However, one death which Vikings Valhalla got completely wrong was the death of Swain Forkbeard. There is a range of contemporary sources from the 11th century which comment on the death of King Swain Forkbeard, and none of them depict a manner of death remotely similar to what was depicted in Vikings Valhalla. Firstly, there seems to be little contention on the year and place of death for King Forkbeard, with all sources agreeing with 1014 in England being the year and location in which this powerful and fearsome monarch met his end. However, the fact that his death occurred suddenly and unexpectedly has led to a range of theories of what may have been the cause of death for this Viking king, with theories ranging from assassination or illness to divine retribution. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles and Thietmar of Merseburg's Chronicle both agree with the statements that King Swain Forkbeard passed away in England and very unexpectedly, but they leave the cause of death as ambiguous. This has led many historians to believe that Forkbeard may have passed away from an illness, as medieval medicine was poorly equipped to deal with the majority of illnesses and infections during the time, and this is the discourse most widely accepted by contemporary sources as well, with the historical text Deeds of the Bishops of Hamburg stating that after many battles and conquests, King Swain died in England, having been stricken by a sudden illness. As plausible as the theory that a sudden illness led to the unexpected demise of King Forkbeard, there are many modern historians such as M.K. Lawson and Timothy Bolton highlighting the discourse of assassination as Swain Forkbeard's cause of death. It is no secret that the Viking monarch had many enemies and that his unexpected passing would have caused great turmoil in his kingdoms and allowed his enemies some much needed respite. Although it is important to note that this theory is only mentioned as one worthy of consideration by modern historians, but not an argument identified in any contemporary sources. The last and most extravagant theory we will be discussing in regards to the death of King Forkbeard is that he was struck down by the spirit of Saint Edmund as divine retribution for the desecration of Edmund's shrine in England. This theory is presented in the account of Florence of Worcester, a monk who lived almost a century after the events. Although this divine retribution theory cannot be taken seriously, it is still interesting to note that King Swain Forkbeard has such a fearsome reputation that many felt it was not possible for him to pass away without some otherworldly intervention. So King Forkbeard is another monarch from medieval history who is believed to have perished due to an illness, although this is not unanimously agreed upon by contemporary or modern historians. Vikings Valhalla left the ending of Leif Erikson and Freydis eriksdotter's life very open-ended and ambiguous during the conclusion of the series, and that is for good reason, as there are no historical documents which make any mention about the deaths of these two Viking legends. Both of these historical figures are mentioned in the same historical texts, the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eric the Red, and in both documents there is no mention of how these figures passed away. The Saga of the Greenlanders states that both Vikings returned to Greenland after having reached North America, which they refer to as Vinland, but no other details of their lives are noted after this event. So therefore, it would be impossible to state with any degree of certainty what was the manner or cause of death for these Viking siblings. But the most plausible explanation once again would be to attribute their death to natural causes, as we have no reason to believe otherwise. And the last figure we'll be discussing in this video is Harald Hardrada, the historical figure from the trio of protagonists in Vikings Valhalla who had the most fascinating, brutal and Viking-like death in real life. And unfortunately, his death during the Battle of Stamford Bridge is an event which never got depicted in the series. Nevertheless, it was a brutal and vicious fight in which the legend of Harald Hardrada became even more heightened and embellished. I have done an extensive look into the death of Harald Hardrada in a previous video, and I will leave a link to it in the description and pinned comment down below if you would like to check that out. But I will also provide a quick overview here of the discourses present in relationship to the death of Harald Sigerson. There are two predominant theories which can be attested to in the historical sources which discuss the death of Harald Hardrada, with the majority of contemporary writers stating that Harald Hardrada perished in the Battle of Stamford Bridge after receiving many wounds, but what these wounds were is never expanded upon or discussed in any great detail. And another much later source, the Heinz Kringla, however, argues that Harald perished from an arrow penetrating through his eye, which resulted in the immediate death of the monarch. However, it is important to remember that the Heimskringla is a source which was written many centuries after the battle, and it is generally seen as an embellished retelling of the account. Additionally, the Gesta Normanorum Ducum is a historical text written in 1070, so only 4 years after the event of Stamford Bridge, and it states specifically in regards to the death of Harald Hardrada that he fell covered with deadly wounds. So again, this much closer to the event's historical document states that Harald Hardrada died in battle after receiving wounds and not from one singular critical injury early on in the battle. Therefore, it is with a high level of certainty that one can argue that Harald Hardrada definitely did perish during the Battle of Stamford Bridge against Harold Godwinson, but the exact wound or injury which resulted in his death will forever be lost to history. So in this video we have briefly discussed the deaths of Emma of Normandy, King Canute, Swain Forkbeard, Leif Erikson, Freydis Eriksdotter, and Harald Hardrada, based on what could be analysed from the historical sources in regards to their deaths. I will be covering the death of Harold Godwinson in a future video, as there is some controversy surrounding his final moments at the Battle of Hastings against William the Conqueror. So if you would like to find out more about how Harold Godwinson and William the Conqueror died, as well as other historical figures from history, then subscribe to my channel Historical Exit, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.